Hi everybody, Greg here with the first in a new series. This is Practicing Piano, and I'd like to begin by asking the question, what is practicing? I often ask my students this. Practicing is, and they usually give me a whole bunch of answers, something about playing something a whole bunch of times till you get it right, playing something over and over, playing for 6 hours. No, practicing is solving problems. If you're not solving problems, you're not practicing. In this video, I want to answer a very common question. How do I put the two hands together? And by that we mean, for example, this lovely minuet by Mozart. Actually, it's by Mozart's dad, who was also named Mozart, whatever. Anyway, minuet by Mozart. And people often tell me, I can play the right hand pretty easily, and I can play the left hand okay, but as soon as I put the two together, I run into trouble. First thing I want you to do is get some post-it notes. Now I want to start off with a little hint. Don't spend too much time trying to learn each hand separately. It doesn't have to be perfect before you start putting them together. In fact, it's more efficient if you start putting them together before you're quite finished learning each hand by itself perfectly. So here's the first 4 measures of this piece. And we'll begin by putting a post-it note right after the first note of the piece. And ignore everything else. Nothing exists beyond the post-it note. So find where your first note is with each hand. Now be careful if there are finger numbers. Make sure you play the right fingers. So I'm putting finger 5 on high C and finger 3 on middle C. And now I'm going to play the first 2 notes, hands together. But you have to do it 3 times in a row correctly. So let's try that. That's 1. Oh, that was wrong. Okay, 0, 1, 2, 0. Okay, let's try again. 1, 2, 3. Oh, good. Okay, now I'm going to move the post-it ahead 1 note. That's 1, 2. Oh, darn it. Okay, it's back to 0. 1, 2, 3. Good. Now, let's move on. And often it's good to go past the first bar line. Go 1 note past the first bar line before we move on to the next step. So in this case, it'll be 4 notes together. 1, 2, 3. Okay, it might not always work out that neatly for you, but that's what you got to do. Now, what do we do next? Now we use a second post-it note, and now we're starting on the beginning of measure 2, and we're going to play just the first note. Okay, so we have that note. Now, let's play the first 2 notes with both hands. 1, 2, 3. Move ahead. Oh, that was not right. 1, 2. Oh, darn it. 0. 1, 2, 3. And we'll move ahead to 1 note past the bar line. so there we go, we got that. Now, we've learned measure 1 and measure 2, and the first note of measure 3. Before we go any further, we're going to put all that together. So, measures 1, 2, plus 1 note. So here we go. 1. Oh, that was wrong. 1. 2. 3. Next, we start with the first note in measure 3. Now we're going to do 2 notes. 2, 3, good enough. And oops, that wasn't right. 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, good, and we move to 1 note past the bar line. That's 1, 2, 3. And guess what we do next? We start with the first note of measure 4. So there it is. 2 notes. Oh, this doesn't look too bad. Oh, that's nice. The right hand doesn't have to move. That's 2. And that's 3. And oh, look, this is sweet. 1. Oh, darn it. I got overconfident. Let's try again. That's 1. 2. 3. Okay, now what? Now we're going to put measures 3 and 4 together. Now, as slow as you have to go, don't worry about rhythm. If it takes you 5 minutes to find the next note, let it take 5 minutes. Okay? You can go as slow as you need to. We're not worried about rhythm at all yet. Really think here. Okay, so if you have to stop and think to get the right note, that is totally okay at this point. Okay, so that was 3 times in a row. Next, we're going to play all 4 measures together. So here we go. Oh, that wasn't right. That wasn't right either. Maybe I need to review the first 2 measures for a little bit here. Okay, and do that a few times till that becomes refreshed in your memory. Now I'll try these 4 measures all together. 1, 2. 3. It probably won't go this smoothly for you unless you're doing a piece that's not that big of a challenge. But this is the process. So do measure 1 3 times correctly. Then measure 2 3 times correctly. Then put those two measures together 3 times correctly. Then move to measure 3, and measure 4, and then measures 3 and 4. And then put together all 4 measures. And then you can go on to the next section. Let's look at a little more complicated piece. This is an arrangement of the Scott Joplin rag called Original Rags. It does present some challenges. And since there are a lot of notes here, instead of just working on one measure at a time, we're going to split it up even more. We're going to work on just half measures. Normally you're not supposed to do things in half measures, but in this case it's okay. So we now have 8 sections. Here we go. We start with first note. All right. And ignore everything else after the posted note. Here are the first 2 notes. That's 1, 2, 3. Okay, see, this is why we're doing it in even smaller chunks, because there are different things happening in each hand. So the smaller chunks you can work with, the better if the music is complicated. 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So moving on, we've now passed the first half measure point. And notice that this note gets tied. So you don't play that D a second time. And this D gets played by itself. 1. Oh, that was the wrong note. Oh, darn it. Ah! Okay, notice what I'm doing. I'm getting frustrated and I'm going faster, which is human nature. When you find yourself doing that, take a deep breath and use your brain, which should be telling you that if you are having difficulty, you should go faster. No, you should go slower. So I'm going to take extra time to get that note that I keep having trouble with. And it doesn't help if you were here, you could see that there are cats playing around in my living room. They're distracting me. It's making it very difficult. Okay, so I did that twice, taking plenty of time. 3. Okay, moving on. Now we're starting at section 2 with the first note. And actually, remember this note is tied, so this D is being played by itself. So the first 2 notes of section 2 go. That's 2 times, 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Moving on. 1, 2, 3. Moving on to 1 past the bar line. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I got that down. Now, I'm going to put that much of it together. Once. Twice. 3 times. So now we move on to the beginning of measure 3. Starting on those notes. And you'll notice that this measure is like the first measure, so I'm going to kind of just breeze through it a little bit. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I'm sort of fast forwarding here a little bit. When I get this far, notice I'm going to be going. Okay, so that's a big jump there. Think, think, think. Take all the time I need. Okay? Now we'll start on that note. So the E gets played twice, and then notice what happens here. This is a syncopation. And this is exactly the kind of thing that makes people say, I have trouble putting the two hands together, because they don't line up nicely. Look how it works here. All right, examine it very carefully. I'm going really slowly. Okay, moving on. That's twice. 3 times. And then we do the same thing starting at section 6. And let's just kind of fast forward a little bit. 1, 2, 3, and then we start in measure 7, and again I'm kind of fast forwarding a little bit. Okay, so normally what I should do is do measure 7 separately and then measure 8, but I'm fast forwarding because we don't want to be here all day. 1, 2, 3, and then, or sections 5, 6, 7, and 8. That's 1, 2, 3. Then we play all 4 measures, all 8 sections. Put it all together. Now, I have condensed into just a few minutes what would take an intermediate or late elementary piano student probably half an hour to get it pretty much put together slowly. It probably won't come together this quickly for you the first time you do something like this, but this is the process. If you have 8 measures or 8 sections, first learn the first one, then the second, and then 1 and 2 together, then 3, then 4, then 3 and 4 together, and then put the first 4 measures together, then 5, and then 6, and then 5 and 6, and then 7 and 8, and then 7 and 8, and then 5, 6, 7, and 8, and then all 8 measures. Okay, so the trick, in other words, is putting together larger and larger chunks. Okay, so you start with small bits and add them together. So you might be thinking, wait a minute, shouldn't I be using a metronome? Well, it depends. A metronome is definitely a powerful tool, but I find that it's good to get pretty familiar, but not perfect, but pretty familiar with the notes before using a metronome. Then you can start using the metronome very slowly at first, probably slower than even you could play it if you wanted to, and then working your way up. I will do a video in this series devoted to how to use the metronome. Using it properly is a skill that should be learned and practiced. It doesn't just automatically fix things as some people expect it to do. It's hard to play and listen to the metronome at the same time. So, if you liked it, like, subscribe, share. Good luck and have fun. Ask any questions you might have in the comments or send me a message. Thanks a lot. Bye.